Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast. We are live on the POSTCAST following the Timberwolves loss to the Charlotte Hornets. I'm joined by Marney Gellner of Bally Sports North. We're going to break down the Wolves-Hornets game. The Locked On Wolves POSTCAST starts right now.
You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Marney Gellner of Bally Sports North is with me to break down the Timberwolves' loss to the Hornets in the first game out of the All-Star break. And Marney, this was, disappointing is probably the best way to put this. It's yet another loss for the Wolves against one of the league's worst 4 or 5 teams. Second time they've lost to Charlotte this year, for that matter. And this was just kind of like, it just felt like post All-Star break kind of malaise, I guess. It was just a really kind of lackadaisical performance for much of it. Some life late, but ultimately too little too late in a really disappointing loss.
It was extremely disappointing, especially just given the circumstances and knowing what's at stake and knowing the schedule ahead. I mean, there was every reason to know, even if you're still feeling like you needed a longer All-Star break or your mind is still on a beach somewhere, like you needed to snap out of it immediately, just knowing the urgency of the situation. 21 games to go. And this was the one, if you want to pick one that's like the gimme or the easy one, or none of them are easy, but this would be the easier of what's about to come for the Timberwolves. So to not get this one and to really just not be the team that's dominating or forcing your hand, and just not be the team that's dictating the moves throughout most of the game, throughout like 80+% of the game, was just so disappointing. I don't know another word. What's stronger than disappointing? Very disappointing.
Right.
That was it.
And of course, we've been in this place, it feels like, many times this year. This was just kind of like it wasn't, one quarter collapse. It wasn't like a complete lack of effort. It was just, they were just outplayed. Like, the Hornets played hard the entire game. The Wolves had spurts where they played hard. But again, even if you have more talent than the other team and they play hard for basically 100% of the game, outside of like a short Wolves run where they kind of, I guess there was one in the third and one in the fourth, but Charlotte just kept coming. And this was the Wolves were down by 8 points at halftime. And it was, a little before halftime, it was up into double figures kind of midway through the second quarter. The Wolves kind of, pulled closer. The third quarter was back and forth a little bit. And then the Wolves had that run in the middle of the fourth quarter. It was Anthony Edwards, Kyle Anderson, and 3 bench players. I think it was Jordan McLaughlin, Naz Reid, and Austin Rivers were on the floor. And the Wolves made this mini run. They actually took the lead on an Anthony Edwards 3-pointer. And it felt like they could kind of overcome this. It was like, okay, if they could, and that's kind of, in my opinion, most of the game felt like, all right, they got off to a bad start. If they could just pull even, the Wolves are clearly the better team. They're on their home floor. There should be no rest issues coming out of the All-Star break, no fatigue issues, I should say. Like, if they can just pull even, then they'll pull this thing out. And the Wolves got a small lead, with 4 or 5 minutes left in the game. And then Charlotte, it really felt like kind of outworked the Wolves down the stretch, offensive or on the glass, really at both ends of the floor. Charlotte had a couple big tip-ins. Minnesota couldn't get second chance opportunities, and it was just kind of more of what we saw in the first half in the final few minutes.
Yeah, it was far too little, far too late, and a couple of things that stood out the entire game was, the Wolves' defense, first of all, which got better, much better in the second half. But again, you can't wait until the second half when you're playing a team like this. Just show up from the start. Don't give them any hope or any reason to believe and slam the door early. But the Wolves were not able to do that. And how about this, Ben? The Timberwolves shot 1 free throw in the second half. 1 total free throw. It was a Kyle Anderson free throw, and it was in the third quarter. 1 the entire second half. I mean, free throw discrepancy throughout the game was significant, but Charlotte got 8 in the second half, at least 8 attempts. They went 7 of 8. And that's not a big number by any means, but for the Wolves to only have shot 1 was just I don't know, indicative of not being aggressive enough, or I mean, there were weird calls by the officials. I'm not going to lay any of this on them, but
Yeah.
you were about to say something. I heard you.
Yeah.
You want to comment?
Yeah, well, related to the free throw discrepancy, I actually had in my notes going into the fourth quarter, hey, one of the reasons the Wolves got back in this game was Charlotte shot 20 free throws in the first half and only, I think, 3 in the third quarter is what I had down. So in my mind, I was thinking, okay, well, the Wolves can kind of shorten this gap in terms of free throw discrepancy, but then they themselves could not get to the rim. And if you go and if we were to rewatch the fourth quarter, there was a stretch, I think it was 6 of 9 or 7 of 10 possessions where the Wolves shot a 3, which is fine, but there was never any, like, it wasn't a driving kick. It wasn't, it wasn't really an aggressive style of offense that was leading to open 3-pointers. It was just kind of shooting the first semi-open 3 you could find, and this was in a close game.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they were trying to shoot themselves back into the game. So part of the free throw discrepancy is on the Wolves for not being aggressive enough going into the paint, and also not being able to defend without fouling in the first half, because it's blame on both ends of the floor. The officiating was very strange in this game, and that is, that has something to do with it too. But I think it was, the Wolves shot themselves in the foot by just saying, all right, we're just going to keep, and they only shot 33 threes. So it's not like they launched all game, but it was like fourth quarter. It was just like, Ant and Nas and it just felt like there wasn't this effort to try and get to the rim, which, one of the best ways to get back into a game and build a lead is to get to the free throw line. And the Wolves just didn't seem all that interested in doing that in this game.
Yeah, there was a stretch where it was particularly prominent, but they had gone in. It was a stretch of they had shot a 3-pointer on 6 of 9 possessions. So 9 straight possessions, 6 of those ended up as a 3-point shot. But as you mentioned, a lot of those were settling for the 3-point shot, not working to create it off the extra pass or off the collapse the defense kick out type 3. So there's a difference in the types of threes you're getting. Maybe not even just in that moment. You make the 3 or you miss the 3 in that moment, sure, but what are you doing to set up the rest of the game? What are you doing to put guys in foul trouble, or to find cracks in the defense, force Charlotte to play a different kind of defense? You can create all those things if you take different kinds of threes, the kind where you drive to the basket and then kick out and find your open man. So I would have liked to see a little more of that from the Timberwolves, but they're just that. And the points off turnovers was the other thing, where it wasn't egregious, like one of these games that the Wolves are just kicking it left and right, but they had some turnovers in just really bad spots, just really tough timing. That late one by Ant with the pass to the sideline, and points off turnovers ended up being 19-8 in favor of Charlotte. So, I mean, when you give up 19 and you only get 8 in a close game, that's a really significant number.
Today's episode is brought to us by our friends at BetterHelp. When you're at your best, you can do great things, but sometimes life gets you bogged down. You may feel overwhelmed or like you're not showing up in the way that you want to. Working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of you, because when you feel empowered, you're more prepared to take on everything life throws at you. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp with a P, HELP.com/lockedon. So we talked a little bit about the sloppiness of the offense, the turnovers. That was a major issue, especially early. The weird thing about this, well, there were a lot of weird things about this game, but the Wolves had 64 points at halftime and were shooting right around 50% at the break. And yet we just talked about how late in the game, turnovers, shot selection, lots of threes, that was a big issue. The offense was actually, it was far better in the first half, but it never really felt, it just kind of felt disjointed. In 64 points and a half shouldn't feel that way. And it just felt really like I was shocked that they were as efficient as they were offensively. And I don't even really know how to describe it. Because no one player for Minnesota, Ant scored 29, but it took him 26 shots to get there. And Nas had 16 off the bench, but it was kind of a late flurry from him. It was just kind of like, as a team, they were somehow still somewhat efficiently scoring. And then whatever they were doing in the first half just kind of went away down the stretch in this game, and they weren't able to score consistently. It was just a very strange all-around offensive game for Minnesota. And I don't know that anybody Besides, we could talk more about Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He played a really good game, but I don't know that really anybody for the Wolves stood out offensively in this game individually.
No, it did feel like a bit of a hodgepodge. It felt like a not locked in, not attention to detail, not everybody on the same page kind of game. It wasn't awful, like it's just this blatant mess out there, but they never found a real rhythm. It felt like there were spurts. There were certainly spurts, especially when Ant came back in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And the momentum changed, couple of big threes. Ant hit that crazy shot with LaMelo defending him, and it just felt like, finally, here we go. I can't believe it took us this long to secure this win. And I thought it was almost a given at that point that the whole thing would turn. And the fact that it didn't is still a little surprising. But again, when you wait that long to show up and kind of take it seriously down the stretch, these are NBA teams. Charlotte won 2 games going into the All-Star break. And, these guys want to win. Maybe the franchise doesn't. Maybe the franchise is hoping for a lottery pick, but the guys are on the court are trying to win the game. And guess what? The guys on the court did win the game tonight, because even when Ant came in the fourth quarter and it all started to turn, it didn't turn far enough, didn't turn fast enough, and it wasn't enough. Too little, too late.
Yeah, a quick rotation bench note, I guess. Nickeil Alexander-Walker was the first sub off the bench early in this game, of course, acquired from the Jazz as part of the Mike Conley, D'Angelo Russell trade. So this was his 4th game in a Wolves uniform, but I think only his 3rd actually getting on the floor. And he was the first sub in the game in the first quarter and played almost the rest of the first half once he hit the floor. I think he had a short rest in there, but played a long stretch. And then in the second half, I don't think Jalen Noel got off the bench in the second half. I didn't go back and verify that, but I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Austin Rivers kind of split Noel's minutes in the second half of this game. Noel only played 7 off the bench, the least amount of minutes of any of the 10 Wolves that played. Nickeil Alexander-Walker led the bench in minutes with 13 points, shot 5 of 10, 3 of 4 on 3-pointers, and played really strong defense. Should have had another bucket in there, a goaltend that wasn't called. And in general was really impressive in this game, and I know his MO is supposed to be a 3-and-D type player. The offense hasn't completely shown up at the NBA level, but he showed kind of that 3-and-D type, hustle mentality off the bench. He played really hard in this game. I mean, there was one play where he got knocked down, got a shot blocked or something. This was, I think, in the fourth quarter. Got knocked down and jumped up and ran back as fast on defense as, frankly, I've seen any Timberwolves player do all season long, and was like back 3 seconds before the Hornets player that fell down. It was just a real, like a breath of fresh air. And I think that's the sort of energy and stick-to-itiveness, especially defensively. And also if you're going to make 3 or 4 threes, that helps too. But that's the sort of thing that could make Nickeil Alexander-Walker a kind of a mainstay in the rotation for Chris Finch.
And really the Wolves are getting a look at him for the first time. He had 24 minutes tonight, and they haven't had a ton of practice time, so I don't know that they really know what they have in this guy. And as you said, a 3-and-D guy or any of these good wing defender type players, they are so valuable. Everybody's looking for them. So if he can kind of fit that mold and can play productive minutes where you give them some offense, but mostly give them good defense, like there is a place for that guy. There's probably a place for him on most rosters. And to your point about Jalen Noel, this was not a great Jalen Noel game either, because if what you're lacking, what your team is lacking from the beginning is defense, then I can see why Chris Finch just didn't go to Noel again, or didn't go to him a lot, because a lot of times what we need when we need a Jalen Noel game is we need that spark, we need the scoring, we need just to get things going in the lightning bolt form on the offensive end. But when we need defense, and the Timberwolves just haven't given defense for a good portion of the game, Finch just gets a little more hesitant to play extended Jalen Noel minutes, because that isn't where he shines. And they found something in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, at least for tonight. I thought he was good. I thought he was solid, and they needed every ounce of his defense.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add about Noel is one of the issues with the Wolves offense in this game was kind of a lack of ball movement. I mean, Ant dominated the ball a ton in this game. He ended up, and just straight field goal attempts isn't the best way to measure that, but he had 26 field goal attempts, and he had, in 40 minutes, had 5 assists, 4 turnovers. Ant was just on the ball a ton in this game.
Yeah.
And Jalen Noel is also a ball stopper. And so if he's not scoring efficiently, which he hasn't, he had one nice drive in this game, but in general, Noel hasn't been really at all for the last couple months scoring efficiently. So that's another reason, no defense, and he's a ball stopper offensively. But when he's going well, he can obviously get you a lot of buckets, not just a bucket, a lot of buckets. But this just wasn't a game for Noel, as you said. We talked about the Wolves struggling against bad teams, frankly, and playing down to competition. I mean, the teams in the league with the four worst teams NBA wide, the only teams that haven't won 20 games this season are Charlotte, Detroit, San Antonio, and Houston. And the Wolves have lost a combined 7 games to those 4 teams, twice to Charlotte, twice to Detroit, twice to the Spurs, and once to Houston. And I mean, that's like, we're obviously a month away, 3 weeks away from the end of the season, 20 games left on the schedule. We're going to be looking back no matter where they finish, right? Because if they get hot, the Wolves finish 5th, we're going to look back and be like, man, they dropped 6 games to the worst, 4 teams, or 7 games to the worst 4 teams in the league. That's crazy. They could have been the 3 seed or whatever. Or if they, if they fall in the Western Conference, like, we're going to point to games like this one. And we've said this now several times this year. And especially, we alluded to the schedule upcoming. You now have a 4-game road trip against 4 likely at least play-in teams in the West, and at least 3 likely solid playoff teams, the Warriors, Clippers, Lakers, Kings, and then home for Philadelphia. That's a really tough stretch.
Yeah.
And it makes it that much more disappointing that the Wolves could not pull out a win in this one.
Any way you look at these games against these teams they're not just below the Timberwolves in the standings, they are among the lowest of the records in the entire league. I mean, I don't want to rip them and belittle them, but Charlotte has the 2nd worst record in the East, and that is just factual. And the Timberwolves lost twice to them, and as you mentioned, twice to Detroit. And let's go down the list. It really has been one of the consistent themes of this very inconsistent team. One thing that has continually cropped up is the inability to put away teams that are very low in the standings. It has happened over and over. It's happened at home and on the road, and it's been with different personnel, in and out, and injured and not. And it's bewildering. It's frustrating. It makes you just want to pull your hair out, because look at the Western Conference standings, where everything is so compact, and you are losing to these teams that you should absolutely be beating. And that has been a consistent theme for the Timberwolves all season long.
Yeah, I mean, in those 7 losses against those bottom 4 teams in the NBA sitting here right now, I mean, the Wolves had gone 5-2 in those games. You're looking at, I think they'd be in 4th in the West if you'd gone 5-2 again, which is perfectly reasonable to ask a playoff team to do. So it's absolutely confounding, and they've only got 20 games to figure it out. Next time out, the Wolves Sunday evening against Golden State. That's a 6:30 p.m. Central tip on Sunday. And, I mean, the Warriors, it's getting late for them too, but it's still Golden State. The Wolves have definitely, last time around, struggled with Golden State too. So we'll go live after that game, about 45 minutes following. So be sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube to be notified when we go live. You can also listen to the audio after the fact on your favorite audio platforms on the Locked On Wolves feed. A big thank you for watching the show. A big thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.